The cry was faint like a kitten caught in the cold, but it didn't belong to any animal. It came from under the barn floorboards, barely there, like the wind might sweep it away before anyone noticed. 14-year-old Sadie froze, hay clinging to her skirt, her breath misting in the early morning chill. Her father didn't hear it. He was too busy digging. The lantern he'd brought down to the barn cast long, twitching shadows over the dirt. She crept closer, heart hammering behind her ribs. He was muttering under his breath, words slurred from last night's whiskey. The shovel bit into the earth with a dry crunch. Then she saw it. Right beside the shallow hole, an old feed sack, stiff with blood. It moved. Sadie gasped, stumbling backward. Her father turned sharply. "What are you doing down here?" he growled. Her voice came out hoarse. "What's in the sack?" He didn't answer, just kept digging. "It ain't your concern, girl. Go on, back to the house." The cry came again, louder this time, sharp, desperate. Sadie lunged forward and grabbed the sack. Her father shouted, but she had it open before he could stop her. Inside was a newborn, tiny, blue-lipped, barely breathing. Sadie's stomach flipped. You were going to bury her alive. He reached for the child, but Duke snarled, a guttural, low sound that made the man stop cold. The cattle dog stood between them, fur bristling, teeth bared. His one good eye glinted in the lantern light. "I said give her here," her father hissed. Sadie held her ground. "No." He moved too quick for her to react. The back of his hand caught her cheek, knocking her sideways. She fell, arms curled around the baby, shielding her from the impact. Duke launched himself at the man, clamping his jaws around his boot, growling and snapping. "Get off me, you mangy cur," he yelled, stumbling back. Sadie didn't wait. She scrambled to her feet, cradling the baby tight against her chest, and ran through the barn door, out into the open dark where the wind stung her cheeks. Duke followed close behind, his limp more pronounced now. Inside the battered house, her mother lay in the hayloft above the back room. Sadie climbed the rickety ladder, legs trembling. Her mother, Delilah, was barely conscious. A bruise spread like ink across one side of her face. Blood crusted her temple. Her dress was soaked through where the baby had come, hours ago, maybe longer. Sadie held the baby out. "She's alive." He was going to bury her. Delilah blinked, her eyes full of fear and apology. I tried to stop him, but I couldn't move. She needs warmth. Milk. Something." Delilah struggled to sit up, groaning in pain. "There's a flask in the cupboard. Sweet milk I saved in case." Sadie didn't wait. She rushed down the ladder, found the flask, and poured the thick, sweet liquid into a cloth. She pressed it gently to the baby's lips. The child sucked weakly, her eyelids fluttering. "She's fighting," Sadie whispered. "Just like you." The front door slammed open downstairs. Heavy boots pounded across the floor. Sadie turned, body stiff with terror. Her father's voice rang out, venomous. "You think you can raise that brat behind my back? You want another mouth crying for scraps?" Duke stood at the foot of the ladder, growling low. His stance was firm, unmoving. Sadie screamed, "We're not yours to bury." Delilah's hand closed around her daughter's wrist. "Don't fight him. He'll kill you." Sadie's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then we need to leave. Tonight." The silence stretched long and bitter. Her father didn't climb the ladder. Maybe the dog unnerved him. Maybe somewhere inside, he knew the line had been crossed for good. Eventually, the door slammed again. This time it didn't open. Sadie stayed up with the baby through the night, wrapped in one of her mother's old shawls. Her hands didn't stop shaking. Duke curled at her feet, nose twitching, ears alert even in sleep. At dawn, Sadie crept outside. The air was crisp, the sun bleeding gold across the horizon. Chickens stirred in the yard, unaware of the storm beneath the roof. She went to the pasture fence, where her father's horse stood saddled and tied. She ran her fingers along the reins, thinking. Behind her, the baby whimpered again. She looked down at her sister, so small, so bruised by a world that hadn't even given her a name. "I'll call you Junie," Sadie whispered. "Like the wildflowers." The baby blinked, as if in agreement. Duke came up beside her and nuzzled the child gently, then stared down the road that led to town. 12 miles of dust and heat and silence. Sadie looked back at the house. Smoke curled from a chimney. Somewhere inside, her father snored. Her mother slept, spent and bruised. No one was coming to save them. So she would. She tightened the baby's sling across her chest, grabbed the canteen, and tucked a knife into her boot. Duke waited beside the gate, tail low but steady. "We're leaving," she whispered, more to herself than anyone. "We'll find someplace where no one decides if a girl gets to live." Then they started walking, down the road, into the wind, towards something she couldn't name, but it was better than staying. Duke trotted ahead, ears up. Junie stirred beneath Sadie's shawl, and Sadie, though scared beyond measure, did not look back. The land stretched wide and empty, a sea of dust and bleached stone under the beating sun. Sadie's boots scuffed along the dry trail, worn leather rubbing raw against her heels. The sling across her chest grew heavier with each step, Junie's breath soft and shallow against her collarbone. Duke stayed ahead, scanning the brush, every so often pausing to glance back, as if checking that they were still behind him, and still alive. Sadie didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't go back. The dirt path they followed snaked between the hills like an old scar. No wagons, no other travelers, just the wind pushing dust into her teeth and the memory of her father's voice thundering in her ears. "You think you get to decide who lives?" She did now. Midday heat swelled, shimmering the horizon. Junie whimpered, her skin too warm, her lips dry. Sadie stopped and crouched behind a cluster of scrub, pulling the flask from her saddlebag. Only 2 swallows of milk left. She tilted the cloth to Junie's mouth, her hand shaking. "It's all right," she whispered. "I ain't gonna let anything happen to you." Duke circled, ears twitching, then disappeared over a ridge. When he didn't return immediately, Sadie's heart pounded. She waited, holding her breath. Then moments later he trotted back, a limp jackrabbit between his teeth. He dropped it beside her and wagged his tail once. "Good boy," she breathed, though her stomach twisted at the thought of skinning and cooking it. She didn't know how. Mama always had. Still, she stowed the rabbit in the sack and pressed on. The trail rose into low hills, then dipped into a gully flanked by cottonwoods. A dried creek bed cut through the middle like a split vein. There, tucked behind a wall of rock and half swallowed by weeds, stood the skeleton of an old miner's shack. Sadie hesitated, eyes scanning for movement. It looked abandoned. She crept up, Duke at her side, and pushed open the door. The air inside was thick with dust and old rot. A cracked lantern hung from a hook. Mice scurried into the shadows. But there was shelter, and 4 walls, and a place to lie down. She laid Junie on a folded blanket and sank to the floor, exhausted. Her legs cramped. Her lips bled where she'd chewed them raw. Duke curled near the baby, ever watchful. Sadie stared up at the ceiling, where light filtered through the slats like faded stars. That night, thunder rumbled in the distance. Wind whipped through the cracked window, rattling the boards. Rain tapped the roof gently at first, then pounded in sheets. Sadie used her skirt to seal the doorframe and huddled close to Junie, who fussed and cried until her voice broke into hoarse whimpers. She rocked her gently, whispering old lullabies Mama used to hum. Her voice cracked, but she kept singing. Eventually, Junie slept. Sometime past midnight, Sadie was jolted awake by a sound, a crunch outside. Not rain, not wind, footsteps. She froze. Duke raised his head, ears pinned back, a low growl in his throat. Sadie pulled Junie close, heart thudding. Another crunch. Closer. She crept to the door, easing it open just a crack. Nothing. She leaned out farther, scanning the dark. Then she saw it. A figure, tall, cloaked in oilskin, standing at the edge of the creek bed. Too far to make out a face. Not moving. Watching. Sadie ducked back inside, pulse roaring in her ears. She grabbed the broken rifle she'd taken from the barn. A single shot, long rusted. She didn't know if it would fire. She just held it tight and waited. The minutes crawled by. The baby stirred. The wind howled. But no knock came. No voice called out. When morning broke, Sadie stepped outside, Duke at her side, barking once into the empty canyon. Whoever it was gone. At the door, a canteen rested on the threshold. Full. Next to it, a folded note sealed with wax. She stared at it, hand hovering. Finally, she picked it up, peeled the wax back, and read the words written in a looping, unfamiliar hand. You're not alone. Keep going south. That was all. No name. No signature. She read it again. Then again. Her fingers trembled. Someone had seen them. Helped them. But why? Who? She didn't know what to believe. But the note sparked something in her chest she hadn't felt since the morning Junie was born. A sliver of hope. That afternoon, she buried the rabbit bones and packed the last of the dried beans into her pouch. Junie was stronger now, her eyes open more often. She kicked at the sling and blinked up at the sky, the corners of her mouth twitching in what might have been her first smile. Sadie wiped her eyes before tears could fall. We'll keep going, little wildflower. Just like the note said. Duke barked once, and Sadie nodded. They set off again, down the path leading south, toward whatever waited beyond the next rise. The third day hit harder than the first two combined. Sadie's legs buckled with each step, her throat raw, her mind frayed from hunger and fear. Junie's cries had grown weaker, her lips dry and colorless. The baby hadn't fed since the creek ran out. Even Duke had stopped barking, his tongue dragging low, his pace slower, limping worse than before. When they crested the next hill, Sadie barely saw the house in the distance through the shimmer of heat. A cabin, tucked among cottonwoods, with smoke curling from the chimney and a white sheet pinned to a clothesline, fluttering like a flag. She blinked twice, unsure if it was real. Duke barked, a short, hoarse sound, and trotted ahead, tail lifting. Sadie's knees gave, but she didn't stop. She adjusted Junie's sling, wiped dust from the baby's eyes, and whispered, "Almost there, little one. Just hold on." They reached the fence line as a door creaked open. A woman stood on the porch, older, broad-shouldered, with silver streaks in her dark braid and a shotgun resting in the crook of her arm. Sadie froze, raising a shaky hand. "Please, she's just a baby." The woman didn't speak right away. Her eyes scanned Sadie's dirt-streaked face, the limp dog at her side, the bundle wrapped in a shredded shawl. Finally, the woman lowered the gun and stepped off the porch. "Bring her in. Quick." Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and lavender. The woman took Junie without asking and laid her on a table near the stove, her hands moving fast, checking her breath, her pulse, her skin. "Near fevered," she muttered. "You feed her. Milk ran out yesterday. Sit." Sadie collapsed into a chair. Duke flopped beside her. She watched the woman mix goat's milk with boiled water, let it cool, then press it gently to Junie's lips. The baby drank, slow but steady. Sadie didn't realize she was crying until she felt the tears on her lips. The woman didn't comment. She wiped Junie's face with a warm cloth and wrapped her in a quilt that smelled of cedar. "I'm Maeve," she said, finally. "You got a name?" "Sadie." Maeve nodded. "Well, Sadie, you picked the right porch." Sadie wanted to thank her, to explain everything, but her tongue refused to move. Her body gave out before her words could come. Her head slumped forward on the table. She felt a hand on her back, firm but kind. When she woke, it was dark outside, and Junie was asleep in a basket by the fire. Maeve was chopping carrots into a pot, humming a tune so low it barely touched the air. Sadie stirred, and Duke lifted his head, wagging his tail once before dozing off again. "Rest enough?" Maeve asked without turning. I think so. Good, 'cause I got questions." Sadie hesitated. "It's just me and her now. And Duke." Maeve waited. "My father, he tried to bury Junie. Said there wasn't room for another girl. Beat my mama for bringing her into the world. So I left." Maeve was quiet, the knife still in her hand. Then she said, "You did right." Sadie looked up, surprised. "I knew a man like that once," Maeve continued. "Wore kindness like a badge in town. But home was a different place. Different rules." Her voice turned hollow. "I left too, when it got too late." "Did you have kids?" "A boy. Didn't make it. Too small. Too early." She stirred the pot and exhaled. "No one came for us either." The fire crackled. Sadie hugged herself, the silence between them heavier than any words. Outside, a howl cut through the night. Not a coyote, deeper, lonelier. "Wolf," Maeve said. "Been stalking the edge of my land a while now. Never comes too close, but it watches." Sadie moved to the window. In the distance, between tree shadows and moonlight, two eyes glinted like fire. "You think it's dangerous?" "Everything's dangerous if it's cornered." Sadie didn't sleep that night. She sat by Junie, stroking her tiny hand. Duke kept his nose toward the door, alert. The next morning, Maeve brought out 2 saddlebags. She laid dried meat, blankets, a compass, and a worn map on the table. "You'll need these." Sadie looked at her, confused. "You think I'm leaving already?" Maeve shook her head. "No, but someday, someone's going to come looking. Your father, maybe worse. You stay. You need to be ready to fight or run." Sadie clenched her jaw. "I don't want to run." "Then you'll need to learn to fight." They spent the next few days in quiet work. Maeve showed Sadie how to check traps, chop wood, feed goats. She taught her how to clean the old rifle, how to aim. Her voice was always steady. Her hands, patient. At night, they'd sit by the fire, and Maeve would hum while Junie slept, and Sadie, for the first time, felt something like safety. But on the 6th morning, Sadie found tracks in the mud behind the cabin. Fresh boot prints, not Maeve's, not hers. A horse had been tethered nearby. She called Maeve, heart racing. Maeve studied the tracks. "Wasn't the wolf," she muttered. "Do you think it's him?" "I don't know, but it means he's close." Sadie looked toward the trees. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, more fragile. Junie whimpered inside, and Duke stood at the door, ears pinned. Maeve turned to Sadie. "We have to decide something now, girl." "What?" "Whether we make a stand or disappear." Sadie didn't answer right away. Her fists clenched at her sides. Her eyes went to the trees, then back to the house where her sister lay sleeping, unaware that a storm was circling. Her voice came steady low. "I'm tired of running." The night arrived heavy with tension. Every creak of the porch boards loud as thunder. The sky churned with storm clouds, but no rain fell. Just wind, cold, insistent, rattling the shutters and tugging at the hem of Sadie's dress as she stood by the door with Maeve's rifle in her hands. Her palms were slick, but her grip didn't shake. Not tonight. Inside, Junie slept in her basket, bundled in quilts. Duke lay beside her, eyes wide open, head lifted every time the wind shifted. Maeve stood near the hearth, watching Sadie as if trying to see straight through her to whatever choice she hadn't spoken aloud yet. Then came the hoofbeats. Slow, deliberate. One rider. Sadie stepped onto the porch. The rider appeared through the trees, just as the last light drained from the sky. Her father. His hat was pulled low, but she knew that silhouette, knew the stiff shoulders, the crooked way he held the reins. A rifle hung from his saddle, and the horse frothed at the mouth, foam streaking its chest. He dismounted, but didn't draw, just stared at her like she was a wild creature he couldn't quite believe had slipped the trap. "You stole from me," he said, his voice dry as dust. Sadie didn't blink. "I saved her. She was mine to raise or bury. She's not yours. She never was." He took a step closer. Maeve's voice rang out behind Sadie, sharp and calm. "One more step, and I'll put one through your knee." Her father's eyes flicked toward Maeve, then back to Sadie. "This ain't your fight, woman." "Wrong," Maeve said. "I'll open my door. That makes it mine." Sadie raised the rifle. It felt heavy, but not unbearable. "Turn around. Go back." His lip curled. "You think you're strong now? You think this place makes you something new?" "No," she said. "Junie does." He spat on the ground. "I'm going to lose sleep over burying both of you." In a flash, he reached for his saddle rifle, but before he could raise it, Duke shot from the doorway with a roar. He sank his teeth into the man's arm, yanking him sideways. The rifle clattered to the dirt. Her father screamed, swinging wildly, trying to throw Duke off. Maeve stepped forward and fired once into the air. "Let him go, Duke," she ordered. Duke dropped back, blood on his muzzle, growling low. Her father fell to his knees, clutching his arm. The pain twisted his face into something almost unrecognizable. "Kill me, then," he shouted, breath ragged. "Do it. You got the gun. Finish it." Sadie stared down at him. the rifle steady in her hands. She thought of the barn, the shallow grave, the baby wrapped in a sack, her mother's battered face, her own bleeding lip. She stepped closer. He tensed, but she only said, "You don't get to decide who lives anymore." Then she turned away. Maeve walked past him and kicked the fallen rifle into the brush. "Get on your horse and ride. If I see you again, it won't be a warning shot." He looked up, stunned. "She's just a girl." Maeve's voice cut the air clean. "She's more woman than you'll ever be man." He stumbled to his feet, limped to his horse, and rode off without another word. That night, the wind died down. The wolf howled once, far off, then fell silent for good. Inside, Sadie held Junie close. The baby stirred, cheeks flushed with warmth, lips puckering in sleep. Duke laid his head in her lap and sighed. Maeve poured 2 cups of tea and set one beside Sadie. "You didn't pull the trigger," she said quietly. "I wanted to," Sadie replied. "Wanting to and doing are different things. You chose to be better." Sadie looked down at Junie. "I just chose to be your sister." Weeks passed, then months. The cabin changed. New wood mended the porch rails. A garden bloomed where weeds once choked the fence line. Junie grew strong, babbling before she walked. Her first word whispered in a sunlit afternoon, "Duke." Sadie learned the land like she'd been born to it. She hunted, fixed the roof, branded the goats with Maeve. She smiled more, slept deeper. One morning, she found a bundle of letters tucked in the fence post. Legal papers Maeve had requested. Land titles, custody declarations, protection orders, a name change, Junie's and her own. On the final page, under the line marked Guardian, Maeve had signed with steady hands. Sadie stood on the porch, wind in her hair, Junie on her hip, and Duke at her heels. The sun lit the hills in gold, and for the first time, there was no fear in her chest. Just air, just hope. She whispered into her sister's ear, "This is where we start again." And Junie smiled.